logout all router. And I believe we actually got through a breaking point where we were looking at creating multiple IDs in our database. And I realized the reason why these JWT tokens were showing up as the same exact token is because, excuse me, they were signed at the same exact time, and they had the same exact expiration time. And because of that, that's why they had the same exact ID. Also because they had the same payload. If I changed the payload, then they would have different tokens. But because they're created at the same time, have the same payload, same secret, everything was the same. That's why they were exactly the same. So what I did was I just changed the expiration time for the second one, and that way we had two tokens in there. Now, I can't remember exactly why I was trying to make two tokens. I think I wanted one of these to be invalid. For instance, yeah, I think that was the key there. But now that I think about it, I don't. Oh, I know why. I wanted to have a difference to test when I do this logout all, because it's one thing to say, okay, this ID, you have two. If you have when you log on the first one, you know you're gonna remove one, but it's easier to just have more than one token, so you can remove the second one and know that we're logged out. So that was at least my thought process with that. Um, so yeah, that's why I did that. So now that we have this log out router, and let's just go ahead and hit enter to run this to kick this off. Actually, it's having a problem finding our tests. I don't know why it has that issue, but if I hit A, I think that's what's supposed to make it run the tests. And there we go. So it's running our test. All our tests are passing, and we're in this logout all router. So I'm going to go ahead and look at that. So when we look at logout all, we have one option where we save the user, and we're actually not even checking anything. So I think that this is all we needed to do. And I guess one another thing that we can do is, since in this particular case we don't have any anything else happening in here, we can go ahead and try to give it a token. We're just gonna do this with no token, and we're gonna get that 500 error. So we're gonna do the same exact thing here, and should not log out. Um, should not log out if token is unauthorized. And we can just pull this out. And what we should see is when we go and grab our user, we should still have our two tokens in there. So let's go ahead and save that and see what our test does. And we should have 10 passing tests. Oh, there's actually another thing we're supposed to do. So that seems like the 401 authorization token is what we get, which is exactly what we're supposed to get. I forgot to change it because I forgot we don't we still have this auth middleware. So something else will have to go with this, go around with that save operation. So I'm not gonna mess around with that, but that's all I wanted to do really. Just get this test passing. What's happening now? So it seems like it still didn't pick up on the save. There it is. And there we go. So now we have our test working for that, and that's all we need to do for the logout all router. And then the next router that we have in here is the get. So here you have to be authorized to get any user. So we're gonna go ahead and log. I think we have to log in as well. And actually, we won't have to log in because we already have two tokens on that object. And because of that, we don't have to log in. So what I'm going to do is I want to make this 0. What if I just make this 0 seconds? And I'm just going to see what happens to see if that matters. And the reason being is I just want to have an expired token. That's really the only purpose of having it. I want to see what happens if, if it's expired, if it'll, throw the errors like we expected. So, in order for me to actually run this and have this work, I need to finish this setup. So we finish our setup, and then I'm just going to save this just to see what happens. And we should, yep, there we go. So it still works. Even though the token's expired, we still have 2 tokens in there. So that's perfect. So now let's go ahead and write our test that we're expecting to pass. And we're saying we're expecting the, let me write our description for here. So this is supposed to be get, and this is on /admin/ID. So now we're going to say this should get a user by, I'm going to say admin by ID. And then we're going to use our callback function. So we're going to put our async in here, and then we're going to do our callback function. That's the technical term for this, is a callback function. So this second part, when you have like something, it can be literally anything goes here, where there's parameters, parameters, or direct strings, and then you have this kind of function at the end. This is called a callback function. And so we're gonna do to get an admin by ID, we're gonna say that we wanna, well, the only thing we're gonna do is we're gonna start setting up our request. So we're gonna say const response equals, and again we call it response because the information we're gonna get back is actually gonna be a response. The information that we get after we send it off, not the actual request, if that makes sense. And I'm just deleting these const response variables because I don't actually do anything with them later on in the tests. So I don't want to store a useless variable. So actually I didn't use that in most of these tests, except for the first few ones. And that's fine. When you're sending payloads back or you're sending information back, fine. But if we're not sending anything, then there's no point in, messing around with that. And that's all we did here. So now back to where we were. So I'm actually not going to do anything with this response, because what are we sending back? Actually, I do want to get this user. So oops. Back to where we were. So I'm going to save this response because we send a user object back. So I just want to do some verifications on that. As of right now, we only have 1 user in our database. So we'll just stick with that. And later I'll create another one. I don't need it right now. Await request, and then we're going to pass in the app so it knows which route, it knows the routers that we have set up. And then we're going to do .get, and then we have to tell it which route. So it's going to be admin, and in this case I have to give it the ID. So I'm going to use the user1 ID. User1 ID, and something's wrong here. Can you guys guess? This is not the right single quote. You're supposed to have the it's the character right next to your 1 key. So that is, and you can see it's right because it's blue now. And then on here we have to be authorized. So we're going to do .set, and we're going to pass in all of the authorization stuff here. So let's go ahead and send that in. So let's set that. And then we're also going to send that out now, I believe. And then now we're going to expect our 200 response. Yes. So we're going to expect a 200 here. And we're also going to want to expect our user object. And again, in order to compare these, we have to make sure that our user doesn't have the same properties as what's going on. And we can so we can, a simple way would just to be say expect, and then we're going to say response dot body dot to equal, and then we're just passing the object that's going to have all of the information here. So when we do our to.json on this user, we take away the tokens, and the password. So I'm just going to copy this stuff here, and I'm going to paste it down here. And I don't really track that the underscore v in there. When you look in the database, you kind of see, you'll see it when we print it out, because I think this will fail because of that underscore v variable, and that changes every so often. So I don't exactly know what the best way to be to test that, and that's where we have here. I think this underscore v is the part that we're missing. So and here's a few things. Since we copied it, we have to make sure we take the spaces out, and I'll just make sure I'll set it for 0. I don't think that'll always be the case, so I don't know the best way to do that. I guess we can do something simple. For instance, we can just say whatever ID they sent back for our user, we'll just make sure that that ID is the same ID for our user 1. Or we can take it a step further and just say the name. Since the token is created with the ID in mind, we can just make sure that the name or the email matches up, and that'll be just as good. That way we can kind of be a little bit more specific, right? And then we don't even have to pass in an object anymore. We can just pass in the string, and we'll have a passing test. So that's just something to keep in mind. When you don't have to test the whole object, you can just test pieces of it, and if those things are matched, then you know that it's correct, because it's just like, okay, well, if it has the same email, then the name is also linked to the email. So you don't have to kind of go through and be as thorough with that stuff, which is nice. And we could, we can do it this way, right? Or, we might change our user 1. So we could also go, we can just say user 1, user 1 dot email. We can do it that way. So that way it's a little bit more dynamic. If we change anything on user 1, we'll still have the data linked. And we're still failing. And I believe it's because of a space at the end. I'm a little confused on that though, because I see, this didn't actually go into the database yet. So we're trying to create it to use this raw object here, which would be wrong. Another thing we can do is we'll just do the same thing we've been doing. We want to get a user, and we'll just look the user up there, and then we'll just do it directly. So we'll just say this will be user.email. That should pass. And that's what we get. Because if we failed, we'd see a fail message. Since it passed, we get that. So now we have our get tested. And now we want to say, in this particular case, we want to find a user by the ID that we are going to get here. So we're sending an ID here. So let's just go ahead and manipulate the ID, and we're going to just do, I'm just going to do this just so it's formatted correctly. I could have used anything. I mean, I could literally just go in here and just throw in a bunch of stuff, right? That works too. And I'll actually just go ahead and do it this way. Just throw in a random series of characters, and we'll still throw in the authorization tokens, and we should be expecting a 404 because there's no user in here with that ID. So now what we're going to do is we're not really expecting anything else. We're just expecting that 404, and that's it. Wait, did I just? Yep, I did. I just screwed up my original test. So let's put that back. And I'm just going to copy this whole thing. And then I'll paste it down below. And then I'll just say should throw an error if the ID is invalid. And there's actually, oh yeah, the ID is there. So here I'll just throw in that random string of characters. And I actually don't have to change the way I have this set up. Usually you do this when you're only going to include this kind of dynamic string that you want to have. But if you just leave it like this with the wrong string, with the raw string, it's still not wrong. So I'm just gonna leave it like this because I don't want to change. I don't feel like changing it. Should throw an error if the ID is invalid. So we're still authorized, but this ID is invalid. So that that user doesn't exist. And we don't have to do any of this validation down here because the user doesn't exist. So we're not expecting anything to come out of this. So when we run that test, we should get our, we should also pass, and then we'll be on to the races here. So, oh, it failed. And it's more likely, oh, we got a 500 instead. That's interesting. I guess, where is this? So when we did this, I want to say that this user ID, it threw a 500 error because it tried to grab the ID from here. So let me try this. Let's change the way the string is written, and I just want to see something because this shouldn't be a big deal, but maybe it is in the way that it's interpreting it. So now we're just testing our ID to see, so okay, so we're not getting our not found. So that's all. I'm almost certain that it's because of the way the ID's set created here. So I'm just going to set it back to the original syntax, and now do what I wanted to do originally, which is to go up here, and we're just gonna create a new ID right on the spot, and we'll drop this ID down into our router and see what the response is there. If we get the same thing, then that just means we're getting some kind of error through the way that we're sending this ID in because we didn't change anything else, because this user is still authorized. And let me go open to the auth router just so you guys can see that. So this user is still authorized. Oh, I see. Okay, so when we throw the error here, we're taking the token that we're sending off here. So this would be well, actually this is the token. We're sending that token and we're just validating that. And we sent it to this URL. So when we throw our error, I think that's the error that's popping up down here. So it's automatically kicking us out of that loop before we can even get there. And I think that's what's happening. So trying to get that 500 error is going to have to come from something else. So so now I know if I do this again, we're going to get the wrong error. Oh, there we go. And again, I think the ID was just invalid. So now that we have this thing here and we get the 404 not found, and we have that handled here because we don't have a user already. Before we even get into the rest of our code, we don't have the user. So yeah, that's what I'm thinking happened. So it's either that or whatever, it's one of the characters I had in that string was invalid for the server. So maybe it couldn't parse it or something like that, because there are only, you can only use certain keys in a URL. So, but we got the expected response, right? So that's really what matters. And I tend to dig into these things offline. So if you want to dig into it a little bit more and figure out exactly what was happening, feel free to go ahead and look into that. So now we're going to test for this 500 error now that we know we can get one. So what I want to do is I want to say, well, I'm just going to take what we had before, right? And let's just get that 500 error. Um, Actually, I was thinking of something else. So there's actually a few ways that this can happen, right? I'm going to take this same test that we had up top, and I'm going to run that same test, but this time it's going to take away the authorization token. Reason being is I want to get that 401 that we're supposed to see. And I'll actually let it be a valid route, so that way we're only changing one piece of the test at a time. And we're making it, and this is how you get more, how can I say? This is how we get more information. So the response that we get from this thing should be nothing. So I want to see if I put to be null. I think that'll be wrong because it's technically not null. It's like, it's just nothing. Yeah, hopefully that makes sense. So actually it should just be an empty object. So I'll log it out as well, just so we can have a reference for it. Console.log, and then I'll do response.body. So that way we can verify to see what exactly we're supposed to get. And then I'll have to change the name of this, of course. And we did fail. And what did we get? Unauthenticated. So that's what we're getting there. So we can actually just go ahead and grab that response body and just say we're unauthenticated. And I think all that comes from here. We automatically kicked through and said, nope, we're not going to let you pass. So that's actually perfect. So we can actually just go ahead and just say what we want to say. We can just grab, we can make it this object really. So we can just say we're expecting it to be this. We don't have to do that, but that's just something that you can do to just be a little bit more specific in your well, not really. It's just, this is another piece of thing that you can be testing. Again, you can, based on your requirements, um, you can do more things with your tests. And I believe this didn't work because, I'm not sure why that didn't work. I think the 2B might have been a little too strict. Yep, there we go. I thought this was more strict, but anyway, this is what's happening here. So we say we want it to equal. So the equality here might just be a different way of checking it. It might not be as strict. So now that we have this one tested, let me just change the name of it before I forget. Should not fetch admin if user if unauthenticated. Right, if unauthenticated. So that means we don't even know who you are. So that's good, and we got our errors. I do see how I did see there was a way we can get that 500. So I'm just gonna go ahead. I'm just gonna go for it, just so we can have it. I'm not certain what exactly caused it, because I feel like if I change it now and we try to get that 500, we're not gonna get it. So let's go ahead and just change this back, and I'm just gonna make it the number 11. And you'll see in a second that well, actually I'm not 100% certain what we're gonna get. We're gonna see if we get the 500 as before, but I'm almost certain that the reason why we got it, I'm not even gonna say it because it worked. And I think that ID parameter is it means something. So oh yeah, I was watching Hunter x Hunter before I started this. So we say express, and I do this, we can see what that means. Real question, I gotta see a lot of people. Yeah. What does this is express middleware. So okay, so it uses a middleware. It will root up. Never mind. So I want to say that it kind of knows what that ID is supposed to look like because we got a 500 before, but I don't know. Let me again. But I mean, actually, we're getting it. So it's just not recognizing that ID there because it didn't throw the can't find user by ID. So I'm assuming that this ID property is supposed to be very specific. They're looking for a specific type of ID. So for instance, it's supposed to be an object. In this case, we made it a string. So that's just one ways that I'm thinking that that's what's happening there. So yeah, so now we got our 500 error, which is great. And we've actually fully tested out our, excuse me, this get router. So we're good there. And now we want to do the get all. And with this one, um, we only have one thing in here. We only have one user. So to do this, we can see if we have more users, and we can play around with this, doing different things with the way we search, doing different things with if we add a limit on there, doing things like making sure all of these things, right? So that would mean we would have to do a test and do all of these different queries just to make sure that they work. And that's actually something that we can do, and it won't even take a lot of time. As you saw here, we did four different tests on the same router, and we had no problem. So what we can, and then we kind of saved our code a bit because what I mean saved is we did some prevention because we're now manipulating our code before we actually pass it here to make sure that it works. For instance, I want to say that if this like even if the type is incorrect here, it should still we'll have our false case. So we kind of have like a default set on some of these things, which saves us because now we know that if anything goes wrong, we have kind of like okay, at the very least we know it's going to return like this. So here we're going to just continue as before. We're just going to do get, and this time we're just going to do admin, and then we're just going to put our slash there. And now we'll set up our callback, and then now we can write our first test. And our first test is going to say should fetch all admin users, and we're just saying what the test should do. And then we're going to set up the callback for that. And let's go ahead and get started for that. So here we're gonna go ahead and say, and do I want to do? Yeah, I do want to look at the response. So we're gonna do const request equals, and we're gonna await. Oh, I did a few things wrong. Request equals await, and then we're gonna response, not request. I'm sorry. And this is gonna be request. We're gonna pass in our app, and then we're gonna do dot get, and then we can do our slash admin, and now we're in our admin router, and we do have to be authenticated. So let's just go ahead and grab the piece we need to authenticate our user, and then we're going to drop down and we're going to oh yeah, we have to send it, right? There's actually going to be a little bit more we're going to do here, but I'm just sending off a default setting. So meaning we're going to send off a default setting without manipulating any of these, and we're going to just expect these cases that we have set up there. So and we're just going to do dot expect, and we're going to put 200. So we're going to make sure that that gets fired off. And then below that, we're going to make some assertions. And sorry, I put my microphone on mute for a second. I just wanted to make sure I had it back. So now let's just run that first, and then we'll make our assertions. There we go. So now we have 15 tests, and they're all passing. And now look, I mean, look at this. It looks so much neater. When you look in here, you know exactly what we're doing. So that's why I like having that described, because you can literally read it, and you can read it like a sentence. Get admin should fetch all admin users. Get admin ID should get an admin by ID. Should get admin by ID. I mean, you know, and I can just change it right here. So now that we know that this test works, we want to say, okay, now we want to expect our response. Oh, too far. We need to keep it in here. So we want to say expect our response dot body, and I believe so when we do this, we're getting a list of our admins. So I believe that it's supposed to be an object of an array of these user objects. So I believe if I do that, but what I'm going to do is I should have console logged before I did this, so that way we could have just had everything at once, but it's all fine. So and I'm just going to take a leap here. I don't think I have to do dot user. I think I just jump right in and just say this, and I can just go say dot to equal, and what I want to do is I'm going to do a to JSON, and you'll see why I do that in a second. So I can say const. Actually, I don't think that'll work. User equals. Let's just grab our user. We already know who's coming back, right? And we're gonna just say this, and then I think I'm gonna just drop a dot to JSON on there. And the reason why is again because we're gonna convert it to a JSON. So now that we have that, we know that this is going to be a JSON. And what I'm thinking is that by using that to JSON on it, it's going to invoke our, what's this? If you look at our model for our user, it's going to invoke this, this part here. We're going to invoke that, so we automatically delete the password and the tokens. So that's what I'm thinking is what I'm trying to do. That way I just save myself some work. And I can just say that user, and let's just test it out. And it failed, and we can see in a second why it failed. And it failed because so that to JSON, I want to know if the JSON is a function or if I just called it like that, because this definitely should be a thing. Yeah, it didn't like that for some reason, so we're just going to default back to our you know, the shortcut, the workaround that we have. So we can just say dot user dot, and we're just going to use the email. We're just going to collect the email on this user, and there we go. So now if I send that off, it should pass. Now I'm thinking that the body is actually looking a little funky. So I thought I printed that out. So let me find our console log. Cannot read property email of null. Okay. So let me just comment this part out and try to see where our response.body looks like. Here we go. So this is our body. And so I wonder if I just do this, I want to see what happens when I try to get that first thing. This is supposed to be an array of more than one thing, but since it's just one object in here, that's all we're seeing. So I just want to grab that first one and see what happens. I have a feeling it's going to say undefined. Oh, nope, there we go. So now when we go here, we now have that object. So I wonder why it said that was undefined. So now we're just going to do .email and see what happens. That might be the part that was undefined. Nope. Let's see. Yeah, so we're getting that right there. So that's interesting. We had a problem when we did it here. So I'm just going to copy this exactly as it is. And we should be able to grab this. So I'm going to uncomment this part and drop this in here. So now we should expect that the response email to be the same email as this user that we just pulled out by the ID provided for user 1. Oh, I see. This is wrong because we did this. So it should be defined by ID. It should be user 1 ID. And this is already an object, so I believe I can pass it in like this. And there we go. So it's passing, which is good because now we know. So now let's go ahead and do our next test case. And the reason why I did this is because as of right now, we only have one user in our database. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go up and I'm just going to duplicate this part. And I'm going to just make this to be another user. So I'm going to change this from user 1 to be user 2. And hopefully we don't run into the same problem we ran into with the JSON tokens, where because they're created at the same exact time, they end up having the same exact value. I doubt it, but you know, let's see. Let's just do Ron Weasley. I probably spelled his name wrong, but oh well. And then we'll just do rweez at gmail.com. And then the password, no, it was the same password. Is admin. I'm actually going to make this not an admin user because I might want that for something later. Actually, I don't do anything with that, so never mind. I might actually be able to pull this off. I mean, when I say pull it off, I mean like remove it from the database. So I can go into the user object and just whack that because I was thinking about having, if I had different users, I might need to use that to say not only does the user have to be authorized, they have to have administrative privileges as well. But that's something that I can, you know, modify at a later time. So who knows what I might do later. So oh, I never finished. So user 2 ID. So now I have to go in here, and this has to be user 2 ID, and this has to be user 2 ID as well. And actually, I don't think user 2 is going to need any tokens, but let's just do it anyway. Rather have it and not need it than need it and not have it. Because we can always delete it later if we don't need it. So now that we have our user 2, we're going to go down in here, and we just want to make sure, see if we have 2 users, right? So and I think we're doing this by ascending order based on the name. So based on the name, whose name comes first? John, then Ron. Okay, cool. So we're still right as of right now. And then I believe, oh yeah, so right here, when I say the limit, we say 30. So we don't have to worry about this because we don't have 30 entries, so we should never have a problem with that. Ascending order is what we looked at here. So we're all good for as of right now. So yeah, we're good there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do this same thing, except we're going to do some, we're going to add, we're going to piece this thing together. We're going to say, we're going to do slash admin, and then we're going to say a slash, and I believe you have to, and we're going to write in, just very easy. We're going to mess with the skip first, and we're just going to do skip equals, and I can't remember if we have to do a question mark, so I believe I do. So let's say skip equals 1. So we're going to skip the first one, and we're still going to be in ascending order, and we still have a limit of 30 of these. And before I forget, I have to actually add our second user to the database. So let me do await new user, and this will be user2 dot save. So now we have our user2 up in our database, and now we're skipping the, so now we're going to make our request, and we're going to tell it we want to skip the first user in this. So this should actually be user2 here, and this should also be fine. So let's run that and see what happens. And there we go. So now we just made a test, and we made sure that if we add a skip, does it work properly? So that works. So we don't have to test that skip again because we know it works. Now the thing we want to, I guess there's no point right now in testing the limit, but one way that we can do that is we can just put the limit 30, and I mean we can put limit as a negative number. And the reason why I say a negative number, because I don't want to create 30 entries for my database just for this one specific thing. So what I want to do, I just want to check and make sure that our this was this, I want to call it, this is a lambda, no, not a lambda, ternary operator, and all this does is it says, hey, if this information meets this condition, if it's true, you're going to allow that value to be set. If it's false, then this is what we're going to default to. And the way we're going to do this is going to say, okay, is our query greater than 30, right? Actually, no, I'm sorry. Yeah, I mean, this is what we did, but even we put a negative number in here, I think Mongoose is already equipped to automatically ignore that. So, and we can always test that. We can just put -1, and we'll send this off. And this time we need to make sure that this is back to user1. And maybe we can leave it like this, and we can always change this to just make sure to say, hey, make sure user2 is second, right? And then we can go ahead and send that off. And any minute now. And there we go, we get another passing case. So we are correct in our assumptions, right? So now let's say I did go in here and I changed this. We want to make sure that we still have the right behavior going on. Let's see. For instance, let's say we change the sort order. Tests will fail, so then we'll have to change the test, right? Let's say, we were sorting by the time the user was created or something like that. So that's just kind of, some things to think about. What else do we have to put in here? And so the last thing we have to test is the sort order. But just give me 1 second. I'm getting. Yeah, sorry about that. I made some plans after the stream, so friends were just calling to verify with me. But I definitely appreciate your patience. Let's see, where was I? Yes, so we're creating our next route to look at. Let's see what else we have in here. Went up too far, I think. So we tested our skip, we tested our limit and sort order descending. So that's the last thing that we need to test. Let's say and apply the specified limit, right? Should and skip. So, and skip by the specified. Let's just say and skip, right? And skip. Skip users, right? We just say that, and should fetch all within a limit, right? Should fetch all admin users within a limit. And I'm actually just going to run this one again, and the reason being is now that we have 2 users in here, I just want to make sure that the limiting function works, because we know that the Mongoose database is equipped now to make sure that if the user puts in something that's invalid for the limit, it'll just ignore it. But another thing that we want to do is to make sure that if we put a limit in, let's say 1, we want to make sure that we get the right user. So in this case, what we want to do is we want to make sure that this is to be null. So we say dot to be null. And I don't know if this will work, because I think a null and undefined are related in terms of the way JavaScript works, but they're still different. So let's see here, and I think it's giving us the error because it's undefined. Oh, actually no. So here we put our limit in. Oh, I put the limit should be 1. So when I go here, we received here that we're getting our second user, which we shouldn't be getting. So let's just go ahead and console log our response, because we should be getting only 1 user, right? Oh, I know. I think if I do this, I have to put a skip in first. Let's say skip equals 0, and then put the and here, and try this again. Console.log response.body. I just want to see it, just to validate it with my eyes. So here it did not work, and now we have to figure out why it didn't work. And now we have to see, okay, is this an issue with our code, over here, or is it an issue that we're having here specifically? And best way to do that is to look at the Mongoose Docs. So we're gonna go to Mongoose, and I mean, again, as you see, as a developer, you do a lot of reading. So if you hate to read, you might be in some trouble. So we're just gonna look up limit. And also, one of the kind of the pain points as a developer is that sometimes the documentation is shit, like this. For instance, we don't see shit. We don't even know what aggregate is, right? So now we gotta look at aggregate and see what the hell this is. Aggregate constructor used for see, look at that. I don't even know what that is. So screw it. Let's just look back here. Usually when I run into these types of problems, it's because either I didn't understand a fundamental part about the code that I'm writing, or I didn't understand something about the library in terms of, like yesterday with the JSON web token, and where we were trying to create, 2 tokens at the same exact time. We had no idea that they would have the same exact we didn't know they have the same exact value. So now here we could be dealing with something a little similar, right? Because we're going off the response, and the response should only contain the users that are within this limit. that we set here. And because we're not getting that, we need to figure out what's going on there. So what I want to do is I'm just going to look closely at this printout, and then I want to say, okay, now that we know how the body is being returned, let's put a skip 1 on there and then see what happens, right? If we put a skip on there, we know skip works. Right? So we at least know that the skip part is working. So let's take that off, and then we'll just have the limit by itself again and just try to run it off, because I don't think I did that. I think I did do that before, but I just want to see. So one thing, well, we shouldn't have to await because we already awaited. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into Postman and just do a real life comparison. So let's go Robo3T. And this is going to help me just pinpoint if I'm doing something wrong here, or if it's just kind of the test environment is a little buggy. That's going to take a second, so I'm just going to go ahead and open up Postman as well. And it's going to take a second. So as you can see, you know, being with your test, you want to try to be as thorough as possible without overkilling it. And that's loading up. We can go over into our this is going to be our local database, and well, we're already connected, so that's all we had to do. So now let's go over here and see what's going on. So I believe we'll have to log. I don't think we have to log in. I think I gave it enough time. So let's go to get users and fire that off. Oh, I forgot to run the development server. So I'm gonna go here and do npm run dev. So now that we're running our development server, we can cross-check it with what's happening in our tests. And I think it just needed a second. So we got that running. I want to say I was a little bit ahead. Yep, there we go. So we're unauthorized. So let's go ahead and log in. Oh, I didn't mean to hit that one. But let's go to login. Should be a, there we go. Let's log in, and then let's go to get users. So we're gonna get users now, and we're getting this. So the one thing that I have to do is create another user. So I'm gonna create another user. This time I'm gonna be smart and do example 2, right? And that's all we're gonna need. And then if I wanted to be, you know, thorough, I can just do that. And then we're gonna go back to get all users, and then fire this off again. Oop, unauthorized that first. Alright, maybe I did log in a user. So we're logged in, and then go back to our get users. There we go. So now we have all 3. So now let's do our query. So we'll do slash, and actually I don't think I had to do slash. I think it's supposed to just be question mark limit like that, and then put 1. So actually that's the part that's not working. So we need to figure out what's going on there. And I wonder if it's slash question mark. Yeah, so that's the part that's not working. So now we know it's actually our code that's broken, which is good, because well, it's not good that it doesn't work, but it's good that we found out what's going on. So I'm just gonna Google this real quick, because limit not working. I thought when I did it before that it was working, but I think it was really just the skip that was working. So here we go here. So we're gonna limit our user, and this is gonna be a little difficult to read because I believe this is using oh never mind, this is Mongoose. But it seems like the way they have their code written is using some other kind of script. So they may be using some other library. which is fine because we just need to look at their query. So what we're looking for is going to be, wait, find name dot limit. So this is what they did here. They added their limit on there at the end of their find, and it was just a pretty long callback. So that limit should have been working. So now what I'm thinking is that either we're having a problem here, or yeah, yep, our problem is this, is exactly this. So what happened is we say, hey, if the limit query is greater than 30, then we're going to let it be equal to the limit query. Otherwise, it's going to be 30. So that means that we're putting in 1. We're trying to get less, but it's not more than 30. So that changed it. So I actually have to be a little bit more careful with this. So I'm actually just going to I'm just going to remove this. And the reason being is because, how can I say? So I mean, I don't really have a real reason. It's just because, how do I account for something being either, I don't really have to account for negative values, and I don't have to account for the value being more. Well, if it's more than 30, that's something I can do in the what's the word I'm looking for? I can do that later in a fix up, or I can just say, hey, if yeah, I can't think of it right now because we don't have to account for lesser values, but we do have to account for if it's too high. But if it's too high, right, then we can bring it down. But what if it's, so that's just kind of some kind of algorithm I'll have to put in there to actually do the value. It won't be something as simple as what I'm doing here. But for right now, I'm not really worried about anybody going in and saying, give me 10,000 entries. Reason being is I don't have 10,000 entries, so it's really not going to be a problem for me. So I'm just going to remove that right now, and I'll always have the opportunity to go back and change it later. So if I go and change this and save our code, that'll fix that. So now if I do question mark limit equals 1, we should see we only get 1 user, and there we go. So we just fixed our problem. And if we go back to our test, so I'm just gonna leave that running for right now just in case we have another problem. um, let's see here. For some reason our test didn't rerun, so I'm just gonna run it manually, and it still failed for some reason. And I think it's because null isn't undefined. So if I just say to be undefined, that would give us the response that we're looking for. And we can see in here that we are only getting the 1 user, so that's fine. So we don't need to print that out anymore, and we save it. And let's see if I can try to say 2 tests were failing. And I think that's just something to go with. What's this here? Oh, I see. So when we went up here and we limited our user, I want to say it's the same thing. We had limit as -1. So let's see what happened here. So our last test passed. So let's go and do the same thing here because now I'm interested. Console.log, and we're gonna just figure out what's going on this response. Yeah, actually didn't need to do that. So let's just go response.body and see what's coming out of there. Excuse me. So here we're actually getting what we excuse me. We're actually getting what we're looking for, but we were at the wrong index. So what I did is I tried to get this one but I forgot we set the limit, it's -1. When we did that, it took it to 1. So now I want to see what happens if you do -2, because it really doesn't tell us, in terms of, when I say it, I mean the documentation doesn't tell us how it handles this. So it seems like it turns it into the absolute value of whatever you put in there. So if you put -2, you'll get -2. And we can go ahead and test that out. Over here, if I put -3, we should see 3 users, and we do. If I put -2, we get -2. So again, this is oh, this is my nephew. Hey, what's up? I'm coding my website. Uh, uh, I, s- I was wondering. I thought I saw you text me. I appreciate you for looking at, man. I've been trying to teach you. I don't know if you're still here, Makai, but I've been trying to teach you what I'm doing. Um, but you rather play Fortnite. So yeah. So now our tests are passing because I fixed this. Did I actually? Yeah, yeah. I realized that I put -2 there, so that's what fixed it. So this is something that we want to pay attention to. So and I don't think I need this one anymore now, because this route takes care of it. So I'm just gonna say, actually I'll keep it, because we're gonna say, should fetch within a limit. So this is just a property of our thing. So I'm just gonna put -1 there, and then we'll still have our 1 user, and I'll just pull this one out. We don't need a duplicate. Um, in this particular case, this so this should actually fail. So what I'm gonna do is, since we're limiting that, we're just gonna say, hey, um, the second one, this should be undefined. Actually, no. Um, 1 should be undefined. Wait, that should equal user dot email, and this should be user 1 here dot email. And then we want to expect that the second part of this is null. So let's go ahead and grab that. So we want to say request the second index should be not null, it should be undefined. I'm sorry, because null is technically a value. And here we go. What happened? What we expected something here. I can't even. I'm trying to figure out where this is. Okay, here we go. Usually means you're trying to import a file. So now I want to look at my file extensions to make sure there's nothing wrong here. Seems like there's an error in here. And I think it's the fact that I didn't close out this test. There we go. I didn't have the right wrappers on it. So the last test should fail. And reason being is, wait, why do I have more than one console log in here? Oh, I see. This is the console log, and so we have that, and we're receiving this. Oh, I see. I put the whole thing in there for the body, and that's the part. So I need to do dot email, and that should be fine now. There we go. So I was comparing the whole object to the email, and that's why we were getting our fail. So nothing is printing out to the terminal. We now have our 17 tests passing, and we're doing great. So, and then you also can see now why we're going to do a test suite for each piece of each router. And what's actually going to happen is, once we're done, we're going to store this in its own file, and we'll pull these users out because we're going to need to use them in other places. So now that we have tested our limit, Now we need to test our I'm sorry. Um, we need to test the I'm sorry, what is this? Sort order. Yes, sort order. So we're gonna do should fetch all admin should return. I'm gonna say should fetch and return admin users in a specific order. And then we go to async. And then since we know we're doing descending, we can just say descending. You know, and then we go here and we just this is this is supposed to be async. And then we create our callback and we drop down in here, and now we have our test written. So now we're going to do the same thing as before, really, except in this case we don't have to test as much. The only thing we're testing here is that if we say and I forget the tag I used on it, so I'm just going to look at the router, and I want to go to this get and dot sort. So we're going to do, and I don't need this slash question mark. I just want to take that out while I'm thinking about it. And then I'm going to make one more expectation here that we have all our users. Response dot body dot length dot to be 2. And this is just saying that we're expecting our sort order to, we're expecting to still have 2 objects in there. I guess another way I could have did it was to say that I could have just checked the second piece, the second index on this thing. But there's, like I said, there's so many different ways you can do the same thing. It's just all about what you know, what your preference is. So here we're saying descending order. So this should be user 2. And actually the way we can do this another way. We're just going to change the index, and now we have the same exact test, right? And then we're just going to change sort to be descending. And I believe that's it. And I think it's supposed to be DES, because if it doesn't match exactly, it'll still fail. So yeah, we have DSC, which is fine. We don't really have to change the authorization token. And we do the await on that. We get our user 1, and we make sure it's the second place as opposed to the first. And we fire this off. We should get the response. Yep, there we go. So now we've tested all of the different options in terms of these different sort options. So we're good on that. So now the only thing we have to do is to see if there's no users, then to give that 404. And the best way to do that is to modify, let's see, I want to say actually if there's no users in the database, then we shouldn't get anything, right? So I kind of think that this is I want to say that this shouldn't even be in there, because we're not looking up a specific user, so we shouldn't return an error, because it's not like we're doing that routing here where we're trying to get that specific ID. We should return in 404. But if it's empty, then we're just going to send nothing. We'll just send that empty array, and so that's what we'll send. So here we'll just send that off, and we should just get our response. So it shouldn't be an error if it's not broken. That's the part I'm trying to get at. So we'll go here, And actually, there's not even a point to test that because it's still gonna send just how we did here. And if it's empty, then it'll just be an empty array. So there's no point in actually testing that. And then the only thing we should do here is actually there's nothing else to test on this. Now that I think about it, because the only test we were going to do was for the error, and now that we're not going to do that, we're fine. I mean, I guess I can just do this, right? I can just do skip, and in this case, I'll just say skip 2, and that should skip the first two values, right? We're going to be authorized, and then we're going to say we want the body to equal an empty array, but I think we're going to get that mismatch because there's technically not the same data type. Oh no, there we go. Cool. It's all right. So that's what we get here. So an empty, if it's empty, then we're not going to get any problems. But this to me seems like testing the skip function. I can always go ahead and do this as well. I can say user dot delete many, right? So we just delete all of the users from the database, and then we don't even have to do this anymore. We can just use the response.body and just have the same. Oh, I forgot to do this. Take this off. If we take that off, we should still have the same effect, right? If I rerun that, we still have the same effect. Maybe not. Wait a second. That's interesting. So what if I just do say const results equals that, and I just want to see that result object to see what happens after we did that. So let's do console.log results. That was unexpected. And here we go. This also wasn't expected. I was just expecting that where is it? I'm sorry, I was looking for just the little thing where it just tells you what it deleted and what it did. But that seems to be a little too much going on there. So I'm just gonna take it out. Like again, we don't have to do this because that's what it's gonna do anyway. Yeah, so we should take that router out. I mean that test out because it doesn't give us anything. So we are now done testing this route. So now let's test the last two routes, which are the patch and the delete. And the thing we have to remember is with this patch route is that it triggers our middleware. So we have to go back on our user and make sure that if we, where is it? Oh, I'm on the wrong model. If we go over to our user model and we look at this pre, right? We have to make sure that if we change the password, that this thing is changed. And what that means is the only thing we really have to do is to say, okay, if we change the password, we just have to test that the token is actually encrypted, right? That's all we really have to do. So let's go ahead and do that. So we're just gonna say describe, and we're gonna add in, this is gonna be patch, and this is still /admin, and I believe we have to pass in the specific ID for that. And here it means it's pretty much business as usual. So we can go business as usual, and we'll say test should update valid, and this is important, valid fields, to put update valid admin fields, right? And the reason why I put the emphasis on valid is because we do throw an error if something is invalidated. If you try to update something that isn't a part of that list here. So for instance, if we try to change our administration privileges, we should get an error. So that's what we are doing. So we're going to take this now and we're going to say, we're going to do our response as before. So we're going to say const. And do we need to use our response? I believe we do, because we're going to check this user to make sure that it's actually been changed at the end. So we're going to say const response equals request, and then we're going to put in an, oh, I forgot, await request. We're going to pass in the app, and then we're going to do dot patch, and then we have to send the endpoint that we're trying to hit. So that is going to be /admin/ in this case, let's use our user 1. So this will be, change this. So this would be user 1 ID, right? We can change user 2 if we wanted to, but it's easier to just manipulate user 1. And then we'll do const. Actually, I don't need another constant. We need to be authorized for this though. Oh, and that's the only thing I didn't do here. So we just say should throw error if user if unauthorized. Authenticated, I think it is. Let me just put a 401 here. And then we can just remove the rest of this stuff. And that's that. So now, if we go and what else are we looking for? So this is so yeah, during our authorization, that's what I was looking for. So set the authorization, and then we're going to send this information out, and then we are going to expect our 200 response. I'm sorry, this chair is like slanted down slightly. It's kind of making my back irritate my back a little bit. So now that we have that in there, we need to, what's going to happen here? Oh, we didn't send in the body. So this is where we just send in what we're changing. So we want to change the name, and I'm going to change, actually I'm going to change the password because that's the most important one. It's 2 birds with 1 stone here. This is a, what's the original password? Oh yeah, so we say testing 1 2 3 4, and that's all we have to send. And then we're gonna expect a 200, and then what we'll do here, we'll say const user equals await, and you know the drill here. So we're gonna drop this in, and then we'll say expect, and this time we're gonna say response dot body dot, and what do we send off in this response? Password. Actually, we're not getting the password, so what we have to do is we have to say we're going to expect the user dot password dot I didn't think about this part. What I can do is either before I do this test, store the password, or try to do the same encryption. And what I mean is I can say expect, and this is what we can do. We can say expect, in this particular case, I would actually need bcrypt. So we'll just unencrypt it and expect that to be stored on this specific user. So, and that's really the only way to test that part. And I'm actually going to just do myself a favor and say, instead of trying to import another library just for this, one little thing, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, I'm going to change the name as well. And I always like to use the name Bob Saget. I watch Full House a lot. I think I spelled his name wrong, but you get the point. So then we're going to expect response. Actually, we're just going to say we're going to expect the user dot name, right? Dot to be, and we're going to put in Bob Saget. And then the next thing we're going to want to do is we're going to say expect the password to say is expect user dot password dot not dot to be. And the reason why we're doing this is we want to make sure that it was actually converted to a JSON token. User in this case I need to get the raw string, so we're gonna grab that raw string, put that in there, and run that. Unauthorized. Oh, wait, huh? So this is another test that was above us. Should throw error if authenticated. Oh, I didn't pull that out. That was the problem. And there we go. So now we have 20 passing tests. And then we validated, to make sure that the change was good. And then one thing we can do is now we should say, hey, if we try to change something that isn't supposed to be changed, then you shouldn't run this at all. And so that's why I'm leaving the original stuff on here. So I'm going to say is admin, and we're going to say true, right? Or let's say change it to false, doesn't matter. I'm going to need a comma here, and then we're going to expect a 400 error, and we're going to expect that this thing didn't happen. And in this particular case, we want to make sure the password, well, this password check wouldn't work, so I'm just going to pull that out, and then we're just going to check to make sure that the name didn't change, and that should be good enough, really. And we actually don't need the response in this particular scenario. I mean, we can test the response, but I mean, if we see that the stuff is already changed, then we know the response is good. And there we go. So this is a should not update if invalid. Should not update if updates invalid. If any updates invalid. If any updates invalid. And now we see, just how far we're getting along, and now we're testing a lot of the stuff that we would have to do with Postman. So that's really the trade-off here. You can just get in here, run script, and have all your check everything that we would do manually in Postman. Whereas here we already have it done, and we know that if we change anything, it'll be whether stuff is going to be broke or not. And as long as we can go over here and change stuff, as long as it doesn't break a test here, then we know that the functionality and everything that we were trying to achieve is still being achieved. So let's go. We already got that 400. We tested for that. In this particular case, we're saying if the user doesn't exist, then we need to throw an error. So let's go ahead and do that. And the way we're going to do that is the same as before. I don't know why if you you know have an invalid ID, I don't know why that gives it an error. Um, I think it might have something to do with, where is it? If you have an ID on this thing, I think what happens is when you try to put the ID in here, that it throws the error because that ID is invalid. So I think this is the part that actually fails. And I mean, there's a way we can test that theory. I can just do console.log, and I'm just put it made it, and this may or may not work, by the way. And now we're rerunning our test suite, and I just want to check the terminal to see if anything actually printed out. I don't think I'll see it. Oh no, look at that. Here we go, right here. So and I'm almost certain that that was done. Which route did I put that on? I put this on the patch router. Um, there was one router in particular I wanted to put this at. Let's grab this, and I believe it was on the yes, this one here. So I need to put this on the get admin by ID router. I'll put it here. So that way we know this is exactly where, oh, I'm going to put it back in the same exact spot. I need to put this here. And the way I can do this is put it here. Actually, there's no way I can test this because I put it in directly, freezing. But that's fine. I mean, I think you guys get the point though. So let's go back over and say should. What's it trying to do again? So this time it's to say should throw an error if ID, should throw error if ID is invalid. Or it's to say, really it should be user doesn't exist. User doesn't exist. And this is a special character, so I believe you have to backspace it like that. I mean backslash to cancel it out. And then because it's technically the single quote, so if I would left that there, then the rest of this would have been left out of the quote. So you have to use this backslash to cancel out what the original behavior of this. So you won't actually see this when it prints, and you'll be able to verify that in a second. So I'm going to do async on this, and then we're going to prep all that, and then we're going to say we need to create our request. I'm just going to grab all this, and now what we're doing here is I can send this stuff, but I don't have to. But because I can really send nothing because we're gonna get a error, so I'm just gonna send nothing. Actually, I'm not gonna do that because I don't want it to throw a fit because this part has to run first, and because with code it's like first in first out. If we have invalid stuff before when we get here, then we'll get this error instead of this one down here. So so now we're gonna go, okay, the ID is invalid. So what I have to do here is I need to create a new mongoose dot type dot object ID. There we go. And then in here I need to, actually this is fine. Everything else is fine, and I just need to change this to a 404. And there we go. Everything's passing. And I can do the same expectation here I can just say, hey, make sure that we didn't update the user, right? It's a bit of a redundancy, but depending on, like, if you like just want to be sure, this is one of those things you can do. I'm low key one of those people. So I did it. And then here, this is just the updates being applied. So this is, just making sure our original case is going through. And then down here, it's like, hey, if you have any other errors, throw that, right? And another thing here I didn't pay attention is that I could literally, instead of doing this, I could have just thrown an error the same way. I could have just say, hey, throw. So I could say, hey, throw new error, I think, yeah. Or I should say throw error. I forget how I do this sometimes. Throw a new error, invalid email. So I can do it just like that. Or I think somewhere else I just threw. I never paid attention to this. I want this to be consistent, so this is gonna say throw new error as well. Shouldn't break anything. But again, you see, as soon as I save this, the tests start to run. So we are good. I can change this to say throw new error. I just forget how I did this. Throw new error. I don't like this. I want to see what happens if I just say throw new, and then throw this error like that. Probably give me a problem. Yeah, it's giving us a problem. I didn't like that. So just to be fine, I'll just throw it back like that. And I'll say invalid update, and be good with our life. And oh, I forgot, we were supposed to throw in. What's the problem here? Invalid update. So it did throw, but something interesting is happening here. Throw new error. This time it doesn't tell me why. Oh, I see. Nope, I don't see. It still should be a 400 error. So this is maybe more of an issue on the router itself. Just trying to throw the error here, same as here. But it's not liking that for some reason. I don't know why, but I'm just gonna stick back. Well, I'm not gonna stick back to what works, but we'll just say I like that. I'll keep it. And it's really because of the way that I have the control to send that out like that, as opposed to having that complicated error object as before. It makes the code look a little bit more bulky, but that's fine. So let's just go down to the next case where we're going for. We already got our 404, and I really think that's it, because after this, after we get a 404, it just goes through to update the user, and then it saves it, and then it sends that user back. So I think we're good there. So there's nothing else to test. So I can go ahead and save that. And then of course, if test cases come to your mind later, you can always update these, so that way you have your test cases. This is just what I chose to do. And now we just have to test one more router. Actually, there is one more test case that I need to do, and that's just for the unauthorized use. Just to make sure that, in case somebody goes in and modifies something, we get that error immediately. And then we know that if we get this 401, we didn't even make it to the other side of the code, meaning like we didn't make it back over here. It failed in auth. And there we go. Yeah, that's good enough. So then now if you go down into our describe, we're going to describe our delete. And this one's actually fairly simple. So we say delete, and this is going to be /admin. And then we're going to set our callback function up. And then we're going to write our first test. And this is a should delete all, should delete specified users, right? Because we're going to specified users by ID. And the reason this is written like this is because we actually write a this is actually going to be an array, right? So for as many users that have the ID matching anything in an array of IDs, it's going to remove them from the database. So we're going to go ahead and test that. So we're going to say, I'm just going to grab this because it's easier to just manipulate it. And I won't have to type it again. I hit Control C before I hit Control V. Control C. And then we're just going to go here and we're going to change this to delete. And we're hitting the same endpoint, except in this case we don't actually need a ID. So changes back to a normal string. And then we need that authentication token. And in here we need to set up our ID object. So this is going to be an ID that's an array. And what I'm going to put in here, I'm going to put both user1 and user2 in here, but they have to be strings. So I'm going to do it this way. Let's say user1 ID, and then I'm going to do comma, and then it's going to be user2 ID. User2 ID. So it should delete both of these users, and then we say dot expect. We're going to expect that 200 response to say that it actually did it. And then we want to expect, so actually what we're going to do is we're going to say const users with plural equals user dot find. And the reason why we're doing by find is because we want to get all the users that are in the database, but we deleted both of them. So we should say expect users dot to be, and it should be this. I think we used to equal the last time, and I can not Google it, but I can search it. Maybe not. I'm almost sure it's to equal. Excuse me. So that we know it's empty. And the only other way to do that is to say, hey, user find by ID, and just make sure that that's null or empty as well. Oh, I see. We forgot to async this. And let me just check for any other typos. Authorization, we're good there. We set up the array there. Okay, that should be fine. So the only thing I can change now is if that empty array doesn't match. And that seems to be the case. We expected this, and we got some other stuff. So now what I'm trying to look for is to do on this object here. I'm looking for something that just tells me how many the number of users on here, and that'll hopefully get me the information I need. So I don't see anything here. Excuse me. Yeah, I'm not seeing anything there. So I'm going to do the alternative, and I'm going to just do find by ID, and I'm going to just say user 1 ID. So we just say user 1, and then we'll say const user 2, and we just want to make sure that they're deleted, equals user dot find by ID, and we're just going to do user 2 ID and pass that, and then say expect user 1 to be I guess in this case it should be null. I'll use user 1 to figure out how I should write this one for user 2, because it might be undefined. Cannot access user 1 before the oh haha await and await. Still saying that, so I wonder what's happening here. Oh wait, how did I get? No, I think that part's safe. I have my async on this thing, and I await these, so I don't know what happened there. Let's see. Dot send user ID user 2 cannot access user 1 before initialization. What this is telling me is that maybe, well, I'm missing something. That's really what's happening. So here I'm trying to set these IDs so that this thing can be empty, but it's giving us a problem with trying to access user 1, and I think, oh, it's showing us here. That's interesting, and I think maybe this one is because they have the same value. So I'll just say this can you can use numbers in these, so I'll do this, and this be user 2, and see what happens. There we go. So in this particular case, it did not delete our users. And I'm trying to think if it's because we need to get the ID value. And what I mean is once you get that object, you got to do .toString. So let's try .toString for this, and then we'll do the same thing here. We'll do .toString and see if that gets us what we need, because it does have to be a string, I think. Oh, nope. So this is another thing that we can test, because when we go delete many users, right? Wait, do we have our router set up to delete a user? Yeah. So let's go over to delete user. Look at the body there. We have our ID set up exactly as we do over here. Except we didn't do this. I wonder if this makes a difference. Because it is supposed to be JSON. No, we're fine. Okay. So, let's give it a second to let this sink in. User 1 ID dot. Oh, this is all the information that we can get from it. And I don't think that's it. So, change of plans. I feel like putting the ID directly in here when we know that it's an object is a bit of a problem, because it comes out as an object ID type. So let's see another way if I just do that hex and try to convert it to the string that it says. So if I go here and do dot and try to get that hex string that I was saying. Dot to hex string, right? Let's just try this and see what that gets us. See if that even works, right? So we're still having the same issue with cannot access user 1 before initialization. And I'm really not understanding this one at all because we haven't had that problem anywhere else. And then it's showing up right in the bearer token. So let's see here. We haven't changed anything so far. We still have our /admin as specified. We have our set, we send it off, and then we have our expectation. Now, why this doesn't work now all of a sudden is a mystery, but we do have a workaround. We can say here, and we can say user one.id, so that we can try to get it that way. Right, we can try that, and actually I think it's supposed to be ._id. So now I had a problem parsing it. So now what if I do dot to string? Because that's what we did somewhere else, right? So now it's having a syntax error. Oh, I put this too far. And then what is it saying now? User 1 has already been declared. So say user 1 1, right? Like, doesn't really matter at this point in terms of the naming convention. So now we're still getting our user 1 here, and which is a little confusing, right? We say we're sending in our authorization token. We send in the ID for the user that we want to delete, and then we send that user off. So one thing that we can do is we can look at the response. So we just drop our expectations completely, and we just look at the response. So we do console.log, and we look at the response, which we'll have access to in a second. So say const response equals, and then there we go. Look at that. Well, it's passing because we didn't do anything, but we want to. I should have did response.body. I'm sorry. Because otherwise it's too much to read. And here we didn't match anything. And so now we can try this again, and we can go, hey, user1 ID. And let's just put it in like that raw as an object and see what happens. So actually, we get something there. So I think I can just use the IDs raw as the way they are. So, and that was the issue, I think. So let me remove this out, and then we'll just say, hey, user1 ID, and then we're gonna use user2. And the reason why I'm using both of them because I want to make sure it works. In this way, I can just go. I want to look. I guess what I'm really doing here is looking both of them up and seeing if they're null. I didn't change anything else, I don't believe. So if this is null, it might have to be undefined. And it's telling me, I almost want to say this is the problem. Let's go find by ID. So let's change this. Let's just say user one like this. Because I think we're overriding a user but the same name. We're overriding another constant, the global constant. And there we go. So now we have access to that. And then we can do the same thing with user 2. And we're just making sure that they don't exist anymore. And I guess the another way here, in this way, would just be, hey, we already know what's in there because we actually fixed our real error was that, we were sending the wrong values into this array. Now that we fixed that, we can just go and say, all right, find everything and expect users to be an empty array. And as long as, I think we might get an error because the objects are slightly different. Oh, never mind. And look at that, we get an error. I mean, not an error, but we get exactly what we're looking for. So now we can go and work with the next part to say, let's pass in an ID that doesn't exist. So we say, hey, should throw in should return, let's just say should throw an error, should throw an error if users does not exist. So what we're going to do is we're going to go in here and we'll say a new mongoose, right? New mongoose dot types dot object ID. And here we're going to expect the 404. And I'm almost certain with this one I don't need to do this either because we're saying, hey, delete that stuff, and it's not an error, it just doesn't delete it. So what we'll do is, oh, I see why we did that. Because we want to say don't send anything back. And so we're going to expect that 404. And then we should expect, and then what I'm going to do is on this, I'm going to just go dot length to equal 2 because we should still have our users in there. Expected 404. What did I forget to do? Oh, I think we got a 200 because the ID was valid. Yeah, I think that's what's happening here. It's like, hey, even if you put in over here, let's just modify this and just change this number to a 9 and then send that off. And we didn't get any matches. So we're still gonna get a 200. It's just a 400. 200 error. Response, because even though that this is empty, um, it's not an error. And it's not like we're going to a specific endpoint and doing that. So this is why it's also good to change your code, because sometimes you might have stuff that you don't need. And then it's going to send those users back. It's just going to say, hey, you didn't delete anything. Now with that being said, I don't actually know how to make this fail. The only thing I know is unauthorized user. Oh, wait a second. Expected 404 not found. Got 200. Oh, I never changed this. And then those assertions should be correct. And there we go. And then the last thing we're going to do is just do the authorization as usual. So in this case, we're going to say, should not delete, should only delete. I guess in this case, that test is pretty pointless, right? We're not getting anything from this. We're just saying, oh, if you put in the wrong ID, it's not going to do what it shouldn't do. I guess it helps. Just say, delete IDs by mistake when you run this. But when we see here that I don't think that's worthy of being tested. That's like testing this method as opposed to testing what we've done, if that makes sense. So we are getting, this works, so we don't have to test it twice. The only thing I'm going to do here is pull this out and do that. So now we can still test the same thing. And actually, we don't even need this assertions either, because we're going to get that 401. Should throw error if unauthenticated. Boom. So if I save that, we're going to get that 401 and we're good. And that's it. And that's it. So now we've tested everything that we needed to test for our user router, and it's good to go. And now we see that if we change anything, we'll notice it in our tests. So this is good to go, and it seems like we're actually right on schedule. So I'm just gonna hit Control C here, and I'm actually gonna go over here and do the same thing and stop our development server. Yes. And then I'm going to delete this because we're done with it. And now we're just going to do np get status to see the changes that we've made. And you can see all the places that we've made changes. We made some changes in the package.json. Don't remember what we changed here. And we can check that by clicking on this stuff here. And then we can click package.json and see what was changed. And oh yeah, I added some more stuff in here, and I actually don't want to keep that, so I'm actually going to discard those changes, and we can do that by hitting that button. And now those changes are gone. And then if we go back and look at the package.json, you see those changes are actually gone. So that's cool. And then if we run get status again, you see our things change, which is cool. So now let's actually get this up into with the rest of our code, and we're actually going to merge this with our master branch because we are now finished. So we're going to say git add dot, and this is going to add all that stuff that we did here, and then we say git commit. Actually, before we do that, we want to do actually I want to commit it before I do it. Git commit -m, so that because I'm committing this to the dev branch. The reason being is I want to commit it to that branch so that these changes sit in there, and then we'll go into then we'll switch branches into the master branch that I said we wanted to keep clean. And then what we're going to do is we're going to push. We're going to merge the changes from the dev branch into the master branch and have that master branch now contain all of our good, clean, tested code. So now we have to do git commit completed. We say user test completed user test suite. There we go. Completed user router. Completed test suite for the user router. There we go. Test suite for the user router. And that's cool. That's good to go. Let me go git push. I'm gonna try to remember to use this -u, and I forget why you have it or if it's important or not. I know I've had a lot of times where I just push without doing it, but I realize after a while I end up with a problem. So now I want to do git branch, right? And actually I can do git checkout master, and actually I have to do origin master. No, I should just be able to do git checkout master. I'm gonna do git fetch, and then I'm gonna do git checkout master. Now we have master. So now I want to do git status, right? You see nothing's here. Maybe not. I'm gonna do git merge, and then I'm gonna do dev, and then look at that. All the new files that we had in our dev is now into our master branch. And now if we go git status, there's nothing in here. And I think because the merge happens automatically, and you see here, this is all the stuff that happened when we hit merge. So what it did was it pulled all of those changes that we made. So look at this. You're getting that git ignore, you're getting that readme, you're getting the app, you're getting everything that we created in our test stuff, and we have those settings saved. And then now I'm just going to do a git push to update our repo. And I'm getting a phone call, and then there it is. So now we are done. So I'm going to go to GitHub, and go to GitHub, and go to my personal website, look at the master branch, and actually I don't see it. I should have merged. Seems like it pushed. So I'll look into that later, but those changes should be in there. I think it's because we didn't do it as a commit. Oh no, here it is. Here, there it is. And it just didn't update. Oh, this is all. I didn't even notice it. There it is. Look at that. We didn't change some of these other code stuff. So this is all of our changes in here. And with that being said, we're done with our user router tests. Next week we'll work with our post and our project routers, and then we'll be done and ready to move into the front end. So thanks for tuning in, guys, and I'll